It's an equal pleasure for me to introduce Professor Jürgen Trabant. He's Professor Emeritus of Romance Linguistics at Freie Universität Berlin. He taught at the universities of Tübingen, Bari, Rome, Hamburg, and Freie Universität Berlin. Professor Trabant is Professor for European Plurilingualism at Jacobs University Bremen, and that was in between 2008 and 2013. He is also officier de l'Ordre National du Mérite, Chevalier dans l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres, and Commendatore nell'Ordine al Merito della Repubblica Italiana. His fields of interest are French and Italian linguistics, semiotics, especially literary semiotics, history of European linguistic thought, philosophy of language, historical anthropology, language politics, and language and image. And he has published, between 1970 and 2014, he published 14 books related to this research. So Professor Trabant will speak about vanishing worldviews.
Thank you very much, Ludmila. Thanks, and I'm really very proud to be here in this wonderful place. And I'm not only happy, but I'm glücklich. So, you know, but it's interesting. In Germany, we differentiate between happy. So, du bist happy. No? It's not happy, but happy. And this is something different from glücklich. So, glücklich is really glücklich, and happy is this kind of superficial kind of American happiness. So. So I'm very glad to be here in this wonderful and prestigious place, and yes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going back to the elementary stuff. James already said very sophisticated things about Humboldt, so I'm going back to Humboldt, and I will go back to something which our friend and late co-linguist Henri Méchonique said us that we should penser Humboldt aujourd'hui, think that we should think Humboldt today. And this is what I'm going to do, and what I'm going to say to you, that you should, and we all together should think Humboldt today. And Henri, he focused on a different aspect of Humboldt. He focused on what you already heard also in James's talk. He focused on the energeia idea of Humboldt. That language is speech. This was his main point, and he insisted on this because he was sitting in Paris where structuralism was strong, and he insisted not on langue but on parole. So I'm focusing on something different, on the world views, and my talk will have three parts: generating world views, then a second part on European languages and globalese, and then a final short part on the global language and world views. So my first part, generating world views. Why is this important? Why is this important, and why is there this question about world views, and why deal with languages? Why is this so important? And here I go to the first author who has who said, "Les langues sont le meilleur miroir de l'esprit humain." Languages are the best mirror of the human mind. And this was Leibniz. Leibniz invented, in a certain way, linguistics as a science of the human mind. And Humboldt then, later, so these are the French and the English translation of this, but let us focus on the English translation. So just look at the final phrase here, that languages are important for the knowledge of our mind and the marvelous variety of its operation. This is why languages are important, because there are, once more, connaissance de notre esprit, here again in French, connaissance des choses et connaissance de notre esprit. So, and this is why this changes everything. This changes, Humboldt takes this over, And what he does, there's a real break in the European thinking, in the European reflection on language. So first what we had is 2,000 years of this. This is what Aristotle says. Aristotle says, where's the pointer, by the way? Oh yeah, Aristotle says we have here the world, and humans think and they create concepts. They do this in their head or in their mind, and as you can see, without language. And then language comes, and what is language? Language, oops, I'm sorry. Language is just this. Language, or the language, is just a communicative device. It's a sign. Language is a sign, and the languages are different signs. So this is what language difference is. Sign, 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 different sounds. And this is what Aristotle has written in De Interpretatione, so 2,000 years before our time. And this is what Europe thought during the centuries. And here comes Leibniz, or let's say here comes first Bacon, and then Locke, and then Leibniz, and then Humboldt takes this up, and he changes everything. He says, no, languages are not just signs of the world, they are not just sound, but they are they are creation. The languages themselves already create the concept. As James has said this, and we know this, of course. The concepts are already within a language. So it's a linguistic thing to create the concept. It's not a universal thing. So, and hence languages are like this. So languages are different. We have the world in the middle here, and languages are different concepts of the world. So this is the main idea. And now I'm going to Humboldt. He says language is the formative organ of language. So there are three elements I want to point out in the Humboldtian thought. The first one is language is thought. It is thought, and it's not mainly communication, because as you saw in the Aristotelian model, language was mainly communication. Languages were only material signs, and they had no importance for cognition. But here we are, and Humboldt is saying this explicitly after Leibniz and so on and so forth. So language creates thought. And now we're going to see how language does this. It's a little bit complicated in Humboldt, since he is a Kantian, and then he inserts the whole Kantian system in this creation of the world. But however, I will say something about this. So the creation of the world is a marriage of thought and sound. So they go together and they create sound and thought at the same time. This is what the creation of thought is. And so thought is always embodied thought. Thought is embodied in sound. This is what is important, what he's saying here. Let us just point this out. Thought and language are therefore one and inseparable from each other. And here we have the intellectual activity is also intrinsically bound to the necessity of entering into a union with the verbal sound. The union with the verbal sound. This is what is important. And this is why we can use the very modern concept of embodiment. Concept and sound are going together. So this is the first element, embodied thought. And the second element, and here we come, this is an answer also to what James already said, so we come to the politics. This creation of thought is, as Humboldt says, in appearance, language develops only socially. Socially, or gesellschaftlich in German. Social is nothing else than the Greek word political. Gesellschaft is polis, and social here. So we do this together. The creation of thought is not something the individual does alone and by her or himself. No, this is something which we do together with the other. And James himself quoted Humboldt's wonderful word, mitdenken. And we have mit, together, and denken, think. So creating thought is really a cooperative thing. And once more, in appearance, language, however, develops only socially, and man understands himself only once he has tested the intelligibility of his words by trial upon others. For objectivity is heightened, and so on and so forth. So once more, thought itself, and this is what my important sentence, thought itself is accompanied essentially by the inclination to social existence, to political existence. It's always political. And And quite apart from any physical or emotional relationships, man longs for a thou to correspond to his I, simply for the purpose of thinking. And once more, a given concept appears to acquire its definiteness and certainty from being reflected in someone else's intellect. So the political is a moment of the cognitive in Humboldt, and this is important, and this is why I will then also talk about Europe and the political implications of this linguistic thought. And the third moment is, yes, creating thought is always creating diversity. Thought, however, is not only dependent on language in general, but also to a certain extent on each individual language. Denken ist nicht bloß abhängig von der Sprache überhaupt, sondern von einer jeden einzelnen Bestimmung. So this is the third moment. So diversity is the third moment of the Humboldtian thought. The diversity of language is not one of sounds and signs. This would be Aristotelian, but a diversity of worldviews, and this is what we are talking about. And this is why culture why language by itself is an essential moment of culture. What does Humboldt mean with this? I think he means something more simple than James just told us. I think he simply refers to, or let's say, first of all, he refers to structural differences between languages. So something like very elementary stuff like this. So we have, in English, we have she is singing, and we have to differentiate always between she is singing and she sings. And in German, I don't know how it is in Czech, we only have one form, sie singt. And we do not decide whether she is a singer or whether she does it just now, actually. Other famous examples, this is for Rosa Maria. So that in Italian there is no difference between Treppe and Leiter, between Scala, they only have Scala. But however, this does not mean that the Italians do not know the difference between a Treppe and a Leiter. So no Italian would go outside and take the escalier, the Treppe, and carry it away. So, however, or something like this, very elementary things. Neuf and nouveau, the French have two words for this, and in German we only have one. So Humboldt himself gives a rather funny example. I like this very much. He said, so in Sanskrit we have three words for the elephant: who drinks 2 times, another who has 2 teeth, and who has 1 hand. So Sanskrit has 3 words for the elephant, and in English or in German you only have 1. So the semantic difference between, the semantic difference and grammatical difference that are semantic differences are what are at the center of the Humboldtian idea of worldview. So once more, this schema of the race, the world in the middle, and then the different conceptions of the world that create and that generate those semantic realms. Hence, perhaps a further idea is, here once more this example, but Humboldt loves this diversity. He says, yeah, it's wonderful that we have this diversity. The variety of the languages immediately, the richness of the world is growing for us, as well as the variety of what we discover in the world. At the same time, the area of the human existence is enlarged, and new ways of thinking and feeling are presented to us in definite and real characters. So this is also important. The perspective, the Humboldtian perspective is always about broadening, widening, enriching variety. It's not about creating separations between the languages or the nations. No, it's this kind of view on variety and diversity. And therefore, die Mannigfaltigkeit der Sprachen, the variety of languages, is a richness of the world. And these are the main essential ideas of a Humboldtian approach. And hence, we have... So this is, I repeat the last sentence once more, okay? So this is the very essence. It's cognitive, it's political, and it's variety, and variety is good. So these are the main ideas of Humboldt's worldview thesis. And because this is so, because he really fights Humboldt has only one enemy in his life, and this is the sign. His enemy is the Aristotelian world language conception. So he says this is awful, and this is lethal to languages, and this is lethal to intellectuality, to conceive of languages as signs for communication. No, languages are worldviews, and they are not only communicative and arbitrary, no, but they are cognitive and plural. Oh, that is important. And hence, so now the consequences for this for European languages and globalese. So we have a rich linguistic scenery in Europe. As you can, I like this map very much. It's the Wikipedia map, and I think it's very beautiful. And I hope your language is on the map, because otherwise you will complain, because it's not complete. Yeah. So anyhow, but yeah, many languages are lacking there. Minority languages are lacking, and so on. So it's a very general language. However, I like it very much. So linguistic diversity is the reality in Europe, and this is important. In Europe, we have in the European Union, we have still 24 official languages. I think we will have 23 only when English gets out. I mean, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. So 24 languages with their German names here, but the specific situation of the European languages is that these languages are not only vernacular languages. They are not only languages for the private and for the home and so for the tent or whatever, wherever you live in, but no, these are official languages because they are languages you can use in all important discourses. So they are what the linguists call their Ausgebaut. You can speak in Czech about nuclear physics. You can speak about laws in Hungarian and about, I don't know, Indonesian anthropology in Danish. So these languages are able to perform the discourses about in high discourses. This is important, and because this is the case, they are prestigious in their linguistic communities. The linguistic communities consider these languages as important and valuable and precious means of expression. And because this is the case, the European Union also considered in her constitution, a kind of constitution, the Treaty of Lisbon, that the Union shall respect its rich cultural and linguistic diversity and shall ensure that Europe's cultural heritage is safeguarded and enhanced. And it is true, the European Union does this. The European Union, excuse me, the European Union, I'm getting hot when I'm talking. Excuse me. So the European Union has this wonderful linguistic service, so all the laws are translated from Brussels into all the languages of the Union. You can write a letter to Brussels in your language, if this is an official language, and you get an answer in your language. The European Union even had a language commissioner, which it does not have anymore. So, there is a political reality of the precious European languages, because those languages, once more, because those languages are Ausgebaut, they are elaborated language systems, and they have a high status in their national communities. So they are not only vernacular language, they are not only, if you want to say, inferior communicative devices. So, and hence this beautiful, colorful map is in vigor. However, the wonderful, colorful map is also an obstacle. Of course, this is also the danger. If you have many languages, you can't see it. I mean, the Tower of Babel is the danger for this wonderful, colorful map. different languages are also obstacles to communication. That's very clear. And hence, we also have to overcome these obstacles in a certain way. And yes, and Europe is also, it's not only promoting and enhancing linguistic diversity, but it's also, not officially, promoting linguistic uniformity. This, I think it does it because, not only because there is this old Aristotelian and Catholic also memory of Europe, but also because Europe is also, or the European Union is also very French. You know, the French Republic was like this when it was founded. It was a very plurilingual country, and only the northern part of the French Republic spoke French, and the other nations of France spoke different languages like German, Franco-Provençal, Occitan, and so on and so forth. But then, of course, in the run of the time and through education, the French learned French. And this model, I think, is also very strong in Brussels. So. And because this is so, because the languages are an obstacle, and because there is this kind of Jacobin tradition in the European Union, I think they, all these devices for the linguistic diversity do not function so very well. The language commissioner does not exist anymore. The Europeans, or let's say Brussels, tends to send the laws, for instance, to the German parliament in English. They say, oh, they understand English. We don't need to translate these laws into German. So the linguistic service also has some problems. But I think the most important thing in this kind of new European uniformity is that the Europeans themselves they become English speakers. Of course, they learn English, but by the way, they do not learn it because they are so much interested in England or America, but they learn it because they want to become citizens of the world. It's the language they are learning, and this is why I call it. I do not mean it negatively, but this is why I call this language we are all learning, and I'm speaking right here, is Globalesisch. It's not English. I still learned. My English book was called Britain and America. Today's English books are called something like Orange Line or Listen or something like this. They have no England or America in their title anymore. Okay. However, so we all learn English, and this is very clear. And the states, the European states, they promote English very strongly. Germany does this with a huge investment. The economy, the strong German economy, invests in a private educational system. You can, as a German kid, you can do all your education in English now, from the kindergarten to the university. Kindergarten, high school, and so on, and then you go on to a business school because this is what you want to do. You do not want to study Chinese, but you want to study business and want to become rich. You can all do this in Germany in English. And the state, or the states, they promote this also. I don't know whether this is the case also in this country. Anyhow, in ambitious high schools, gymnasium, you have always bilingual classes. So any ambitious director of a high school will strengthen the bilingual education. And of course, internationally, the high discourses become more and more English. So science is done in English already for a long time. The business, of course, is done in English. Siemens, for instance, in Munich, in their firm, the language of the firm is English. So there's a strong movement towards English, and of course, and this, but I do not mean this ironically, and this is wonderful. So a whole nation, I think your nation too, a whole nation learns English, and we become bilingual. That is great. However, and here's my but, however, there is a little problem with this. If if the high discourses are done more and more only in English, if you speak about, let's say once more, nuclear physics, law, I don't know, economy only in English, then of course this has consequences for the language and for the society. So first for the language. The European languages are proud of being these culture languages, of being able to do everything in their languages. I mean, we are proud that we are able to talk about philosophy and sciences and so on in our languages. And this is one of the huge and important cultural revolutions of Europe from the 16th century on. So in the medieval times it was like this. Latin was the high language, and the Vulgate, all the other languages were low languages. These were vernacular languages for the private and so on, and Latin was the language for the university, for the kings, the emperor, and of course for religion. And now in the 16th century, or from the 16th century on, this situation becomes different. So the vulgar languages go up to the high discourses. Since I'm a French linguist, so I have studied this in France. It's very, very nice. You can study this very nicely in France. So from the beginning of the 16th century, French goes up first into the administration of the kingdom, then the sciences follow, and then, let's say, 1637, it's Descartes who writes in French. He also writes still in Latin, but Le Discours de la Méthode is written in French, not for the schools, but for what he calls the people with a natural intelligence. And this, the expression natural intelligence is important because people with natural intelligence are also the women. So this is a real cultural revolution, including also the women into the philosophical discourse. Hence, we have this kind of ascension of the vulgar languages into the high language. And this lasts until 1950, to my impression, and then English becomes again the new Latin or the new high language. And this means, of course, that the vulgar languages are going down. I mean, I know everybody here will protest against this, but however, there is this tendency that if you do not speak about nuclear physics in your own language, then you will not be able to talk to your neighbor about nuclear physics in your own language. So this a tendency is that the vulgar languages become low languages again. So this was the drawback for the languages. But there's also, at least in my country, a drawback for the society. So this learning of English is an elite thing. Of course, no worker can afford to send his child to an English kindergarten. The kindergarten is very expensive, the English school is very expensive, also the private university for the BA in management is very expensive, hence this is an elite thing. And my impression is in my country that, like after the first 30 years war, now the elite is leaving the national linguistic community and forming a kind of aristocracy apart. So there is a kind of or let's say a movement toward disintegration from above. And this has also unhappy consequences for the rest of the community, because the immigrants, why should they learn German, for instance? Why should they learn German? They immediately see that the high language of this country is English. You have certainly remarked that when the new immigrants came, the Germans at the Munich station, they welcomed them in English. Welcome, refugees welcome. So they welcome not in German. So the migrants immediately know. So the language of that country is English. So hence there is I mean, this is the danger that the new citizens of the country do not become members of the language community. Hence there's disintegration from above and non-integration from below. I think these are these are real dangers with this kind of advancement of globalese in our societies. So, once more, I think it's wonderful that the whole nation becomes bilingual, but however, there are certain dangers. And I think, and this is my next point is, I think it's not necessary that, at least in our country, we do more publicity for this. This is and has been studied by by a guy named Jürgen. Oh, I have him here. Wait a minute. So, by Jürgen Gerhardt. Jürgen Gerhardt has studied this movement of the Europeans learning English, and he has shown that this is a tsunami which is unstoppable, and everybody, the young generations in Europe learn English, and there is no need to do more publicity for this. But this is exactly what I'm opposing to, because the president of my country, Mr. Gauck, he complains about Europe's plurilingualism. He says, first of all, we simply lack a common vehicular language in Europe. In Europe, 23 official languages, this was before Croatia became member. 23 official languages are acknowledged, innumerable other languages and dialects must be added. But that he does not mean it in a positive way. He means this in this sense. So 23 language is the Tower of Babel, and hence we have to do something about this. We all have to learn more and more English. So, and this is hidden under a euphemism called plurilingualism, Mehrsprachigkeit. It says we have to do not only Mehrsprachigkeit, meaning learning English for the elites, but the whole people has to become mehrsprachig. There has to be plurilingualism for the vaster groups of population, for ever more people, eventually for all. So. And Mehrsprachigkeit does not mean Mehrsprachigkeit. It does not mean real plurilingualism. It's only referring to English-German bilingualism. This is very clear. So it does not mean let's become all mehrsprachig, let's become plurilingual in German. So let's learn Czech, for instance. Let's learn Polish. Let's learn Hungarian. Let's learn Italian. Let's learn French. No, Mehrsprachigkeit just means this kind of neo-medieval diglossia between English and German. Nothing else. And this is what I'm complaining at, and I think also Jürgen Gerhardt, who wrote this book, in his book, Mehrsprachigkeit, plurilingualism, just means English-German bilingualism. And as you can see, it's a whole, let's say, a whole capitalist thing, transnationales sprachliches Kapital als Ressource einer globalisierten Welt. So the only capital you can accumulate is English. The other languages are no capital at all in this worldview. So what he is doing, he says, yes, the accumulation of English is important, and he has no feeling for a real plurilingualism. So learning languages in order to learn different worldviews, for instance. On the contrary, he's even fighting this. So he explicitly says languages have nothing to do with culture. They are only means of communication, and hence we can also leave them. It's not important. So the main thing is that we communicate with a great mass of people. So this is what he is advocating. And the same is true, by the way, with Philip van Parijs' book, Linguistic Justice for Europe and for the World. Linguistic justice means everybody is able to speak English. This is what linguistic justice means, because if everybody is able to speak English, of course, also the elites have no advantages anymore, and it's a real democratic kind of thing to be able to speak English. So, of course, once more, there is a problem. The problem of plurilingualism is there. Many languages are an obstacle to communication, and of course we have to become plurilingual, but what I'm opposing to is to call this plurilingualism and to say this is linguistic justice without seeing that there are also victims of this movement. And the victims are, of course, our languages. But these people, Philip van Parijs and also Jürgen Gerhardt. But these are friends of mine, by the way, so I'm not opposed to them personally, but I'm opposed to their doctrine. So they are both social philosopher. Paradis is a social philosopher, and Gerhardt is a sociologist. Of course, they are only considering the well-functioning of a society. And it functions smoothly if there is no obstacle for communication. But they have no feeling at all. They are really very cruel with our languages and with different worldviews. First they say a worldview, different worldviews do not exist. It's just an invention or an imagination of linguists, and they have no cultural importance. This is something I simply do not understand. I mean, how can they imagine that languages have no cultural importance anyhow? So this is what our conference is about. In Philip van Parijs, he says, oh, we need a lingua franca, yeah, and only if we are able to work out and implement efficient and fair solutions for our common problems on a European and on a global scale. So this is why we have to have a common communication. And if this movement then is a danger for the other languages, the French would say tant pis. So we will just have we'll just have an accent, a peculiar accent. So I have a German accent in my English, you will have a Czech accent in your English. And this, as he says, might one day, so the peculiar yet intelligible accent, he doesn't mean the English accent, he means the accent in English. A peculiar yet intelligible accent might one day become just as good a marker of linguistic dimension of one's collective identity as one's ancestral language. And the curse of Babel will then at long last be undone. So we are all happy. Here we are happy with one language. Just a quick word on the background. The backgrounds of this kind of universalist, cosmopolitan, and only communicative conception of a linguistic policy are three, I think. In linguistics, we have the universal linguistics, let's say, of a Chomskyan type, for instance. They are only interested in the universal part of languages. They are not interested in the individual or particular aspects of languages. Then in our culture we have a very strong tradition for this, that we consider languages as obstacles. It's in the Bible, and the Bible is in our blood in a certain way, and so the Bible, we can't avoid this. And the Bible says languages are a punishment, very clearly. And only a few Christian theologians find that languages are a wealth given by God. Donum Dei, you can find it sometimes, but mostly Babel and the languages are a punishment. And then we have philosophy. Philosophy is universalistic from Greek times. Plato argues against language as a bad image. Aristotle, we have seen, he doesn't consider language very well. So we have to say, only 200 years of our common convictions here, namely from Leibniz to, let's say, 1765, from Leibniz's new essays to 1965 to Chomsky's aspects. Only between 200 years of linguistic thought of diversity. So, and the third background is, of course, once more the national state idea. Domergue, who was one of the main Jacobin politicians of language, la République une et indivisible dans son territoire, dans son système politique, doit être une et indivisible dans son langage. So this French uniformity policy has been a strong European heritage. So my last point, and very quickly I come to the end. Yes, global language and worldviews. I think we have to know that there is this kind of tendency or tsunami or strong tendency towards a linguistic uniformity, which is, as I said, which I do not find do not think is a catastrophe, which is wonderful if you go, and if I come here to Prague, for instance, I don't speak any Czech, and I can ask the people in English, where's the station and where's the university. I'm very glad. So we have to have this. However, we have also to go back to this guy, to Humboldt, once more, and the 3 points he pointed out in his theory of world views is, yes, language is cognition, once more, and not only communication. Second, language is political, I and thou, and hence it is a means of being together. It's a cognitive and political thing, and being together and speaking together is a cognitive, and doing this in different ways. So linguistic diversity is a cognitive wealth. Yes, this is what I wanted to say, and hence, once more, come back to our friend Henri Michonic. Think Humboldt today, I think. Thank you very much. Thank you.